located on the northwest coastline of France. Here can be found the legendary Carnac stones.
Archaeologists are baffled by the many megaliths at Carnac here. It's clearly a massive construction project.
More than 3,000 stones stand in the fields of Brittany, older than Stonehenge, older than the pyramids, and for centuries everyone believed that was all there was. Then someone pushed ground radar across the empty soil between them. In ground where nothing should exist, the readings spiked, tracing the shapes of buried structures hidden just beneath the surface. Vanished stones, forgotten fires, something far older waiting in the dark.
Of over 3,000 massive rocks, arranged in rows and other shapes, and spreading across more than 2 miles of French countryside.
What you can see at Carnac may be the smallest part of the story, and what the radar found beneath it is about to rewrite everything we thought we knew. The stones, everyone sees. To understand why that spike matters, you have to understand where they were standing. Carnac sits on the southern coast of Brittany, in northwest France, near the Bay of Morbihan. And the stones here are not scattered at random. They run in long, deliberate rows called alignments, marching across the landscape for kilometers. More than 3,000 of them survive today.
You're talking thousands of stones that are aligned in straight rows, aligned in circles, aligned in squares and rectangles.
Stretching across roughly 10 kilometers of countryside, from Carnac and La Trinité-sur-Mer all the way to Erdavon. The biggest groups even have names: the Menec Rose, the Kermario Rose, the Kurleskin Rose, and the Manio alignment, each one a parade of stone marching in the same direction. They were raised during the Neolithic, the late Stone Age, by farming communities who left no writing and no explanation behind. Some are small, others are towering blocks weighing many tons. People come from all over the world to walk these rows, and they leave assuming they have finally seen Carnac. But here's the part nobody talks about. What you can see above the grass may be the smallest part of the whole story: the buried problem. Because for one of the most famous prehistoric sites on Earth, Carnac has barely been studied. For most of the last century, it was treated as something to protect and photograph, not something to dig into. The largest excavation inside the alignments happened back in 1922, more than 100 years ago. After that, serious investigation almost stopped. That left a maddening gap.
Why are people doing this? Why are they putting so much time and energy into something? And the short answer, I believe, is that we really don't know.
Researchers could map the stones still standing. They could trace the surviving rows, but they could not answer the question that mattered most. How much of the original Carnac has already been lost? Over thousands of years, stones fell, were dragged off for walls and houses, were buried under shifting soil, or cleared away so fields could be plowed. What survives is almost certainly an edited, damaged fragment of something far bigger. And there was a deeper problem still. The soil around Carnac is acidic, and acidic soil eats away bone and most organic material, the very things archaeologists use to date a site. Think about how frustrating that is. You are standing inside one of the oldest monuments in the world, and the ground itself refuses to tell you its age. So, for decades, the true age of Carnac stayed locked away, just out of reach, until someone finally decided to stop guessing and start scanning, seeing through soil. Here is the simple version of how they did it. Ground-penetrating radar fires energy down into the earth and listens for what bounces back. Magnetometry senses buried fire and disturbed ground.
But if it wasn't magic that created this forest of stones, who or what did?
Electrical resistivity feels for hidden stone. Run them across a field, and a picture of everything underneath slowly forms, without lifting a single shovel. And in recent years, teams brought exactly these tools to the ground in and around the Kurleskin and Manio alignments, mapping the empty spaces between the visible stones. Which brings us right back to that spike in the readings. In a field where nothing was supposed to be, they decided to look closer. And before we go down into the dirt with them, do yourself one favor and subscribe, because the deeper we dig into this ground, the stranger this story is about to get. What the scans found. Picture the team standing over the readout. In the open ground near the alignments, the instruments were lighting up with anomalies, patches where the soil simply did not behave like ordinary soil. One cluster of high-intensity magnetic readings spread across several hundred square meters. The pattern was unmistakable to them, material that had once been heated until it locked in a permanent magnetic signature, the fingerprint of fire. They read it as buried hearths and cooking stones. And this was not a wild guess, because earlier digs in the Carnac area had already pulled the same kind of burnt features out of the ground. The machines were seeing something real. Then there were two faint, ghostly circular shapes in the data, soft enough that they could have been missed entirely. The team interpreted these as buried stones, the collapsed remains of small mounds or cairns, sitting completely hidden beneath a field that people stroll across without a second glance. Think about what that actually means.
Modern archaeologists would say that people who were one step removed from cavemen were quarrying these giant stones, some of them weighing 100, 200 tons, even up to 350 tons.
Underground, that looks like nothing at all. The instruments were tracing the buried skeletons of structures no eye had seen in thousands of years. But scans only hint. To know for certain, somebody had to put a blade in the earth. And on the edge of Carnac, somebody was already about to. Race against concrete. The place was called Lelasker, in the town of Pluharnal, just outside Carnac. And the reason anyone dug there at all is almost absurd. The land had been scheduled to become a business park. The machines were coming. Before the concrete could be poured, archaeologists were sent in to check what lay underneath, working against the clock. So, picture them out there, kneeling in the dirt, moving fast, half expecting to find nothing worth the trouble. And then the ground started talking back. The standing stones that had once risen here were long gone, hauled away, or broken up generations ago. But the holes they had been planted in were still there. These foundation pits, the sockets where the great stones were once set upright, had survived everything that erased the stones themselves. The stone was gone. The footprint remained. Here's why that stopped them cold. It means the missing stones of Carnac are not truly missing. Even where every monument has vanished from the surface, the earth still remembers exactly where each one stood. Each socket is a fixed point, a precise location where a giant stone was once hauled upright and rammed into the ground by human hands. Whole lost rows can be traced again, like outlines pressed into the soil, waiting all this time to be read. And as the team cleared more ground, they realized the sockets were not alone down there. Fire beside the stones, running right alongside the foundation pits, and lined up parallel to the rows of vanished stones, they uncovered hearths and cooking pits. And here's where it gets strange. Nobody can say for certain what those fires were for. That is the honest answer. The pits might mark feasts and gatherings held while the stones were being raised. They might have given light or warmth to people working long into the night.
We can see that most of the stones have been cut on one side or another.
They might belong to ceremonies we will never fully understand. But sit with the image for a moment. These were not cold stones standing in silent, empty fields. There was firelight here. There was cooking and noise and crowds of living people. A monument on this scale was not thrown up in an afternoon. It may have taken generations, and these scattered fires are the traces of all that human effort, frozen in the dirt. And then, digging beneath even the hearths, the team hit something far older. Tomb upon a hut. Below the later features at Lelasker, they uncovered a monumental tomb. It had been built around 4700 BC, a small circular mound wrapped around a rectangular stone chamber, one of the earliest tombs of its kind anywhere in Europe. And here is the detail that should raise the hair on your arms. It had been set down directly on top of something older still, the remains of a hut once used by Mesolithic hunter-gatherers, people who lived on this exact spot long before farming ever reached Brittany. Think about that layering for a second. The same small patch of earth, chosen and chosen again by people separated by enormous stretches of time. First, a hunter-gatherer shelter. Then, much later, a tomb raised directly over it. Then, later still, the great stone rows rising across the land all around it. This place mattered, generation after generation, century after century, long before it ever became the Carnac we recognize today. And the dirt they were lifting it out of was about to answer the one question Carnac had refused to give up for 100 years. The number revealed. Remember the acidic soil? the curse that destroys the material needed for dating. That is exactly why this dig was so precious. Because Lelasker, unlike so much of the rest of Carnac, finally surrendered things that could actually be dated: sediment, charcoal, and fragments of stone.
An interesting coincidence for all the megalithic structures we have around the Earth is that they're placed at specific points that could be harnessing an ancient world energy grid.
The findings fed into a landmark study published in 2025 in the journal Antiquity, the work of a French and Swedish research project. The team ran nearly 50 radiocarbon measurements on the site, the most precise dating of the Carnac alignments ever attempted, and the number landed like a hammer. The stone rows in this section were raised between roughly 4,600 and 4,300 BC. Let that settle, because it quietly rewrites the map of prehistoric Europe. It places these alignments among the very earliest megalithic monuments on the entire continent. The researchers concluded that the Bay of Morbihan, the region cradling Carnac, is the earliest known megalithic region in all of Europe, and the comparisons are staggering. The famous standing stones of Stonehenge were raised more than 1,000 years after these Carnac rows had already begun. The Great Pyramid of Giza came later still. Carnac was not copying anyone. Carnac came first, which forces a question you cannot unask. If the rows are this old, and this much of it still survives buried, then how much of the real Carnac is still out there, missing? The missing stones. Today, visitors count roughly 3,000 stones, but the people who study this landscape strongly suspect the original number was far higher. 6,000 years is a brutal stretch of time to survive. Stones toppled in storms and were swallowed by the earth. Farmers cleared them to plow. Builders smashed them up for walls, roads, and foundations. Whole rows were quietly erased from the surface, and this is why every scrap of buried evidence matters so much. Every empty socket and every faint circle on a magnetic survey is a breadcrumb. Slowly, scan by scan and dig by dig, the full shape of the original monument can be pieced back together, and it keeps coming out larger than anyone expected, which leaves the hardest question of all: not how they built it, but why. Why they built it. Why would Stone Age communities with no metal tools and no machines drag and raise thousands of massive stones across kilometers of open land? Here is the honest truth. Nobody knows for certain, and anyone who tells you they do is guessing. But there are serious ideas. The most widely held is that Carnac was a sacred ceremonial landscape, a place built for ritual and gathering. Others argue the rows were territorial markers, drawing the boundaries of a people. The tombs hint at a bond with the dead and the honoring of ancestors. And many have pointed to the sky, suggesting the rows track the sun or the moon, though that idea stays debated and unproven. What is not in doubt is the sheer scale of it. Raising this many stones over this many generations took planning, shared belief, and an entire society pulling in one direction. But the people who could actually explain it are gone, and they left no words behind. Only the stones, and, as we now know, only what is still hidden beneath them, beneath the fields. For centuries, people thought Carnac was simply a field of standing stones, beautiful, mysterious, and complete. Exactly what you see when you visit. The scans and the spade tell a very different story. Those visible stones are only the surviving edge of something far larger and far older. A buried prehistoric landscape of lost sockets, hidden hearths, vanished cairns, and tombs stacked on the homes of people who came before. The radar is only beginning to map it, and here is the thing that should stay with you tonight. Most of Carnac has never been excavated. The fields are still full. The ground out there is still holding its secrets, waiting for the next scan, the next blade in the dirt, and the next number that rewrites everything we thought we knew. Most of Carnac has never even been touched, and every new scan rewrites the story. So, subscribe and stay close, because you want to be here the moment the next discovery breaks. And then, tell me this in the comments. If you could send one team to scan and dig a single untouched corner of Carnac, what do you believe is buried down there? And why do you think these ancient people really raised the stones? I read every single one.